Imagine that you are in charge of pricing at LinkedIn and you're juggling ad formats, targeting, and yield. And now you jump to Zoom or DocuSign, where the challenge is bundling subscriptions and driving expansion of revenue. Jan Pasternak has lived in both worlds. And in this conversation, we explore the lessons that he has learned across decades of building pricing strategy from the ground up. Jan and I used to work together 15 years ago when we were at Microsoft, and we lost touch with each other until Pricing Week, the Pricing Week conference, brought us back together. Jan, I am so happy that we have reconnected and are going to have the chance today to talk through some of your experiences.
Thank you very much, James. I'm also glad we reconnected, and thank you for having me here.
Excellent. So let's get how you got into this crazy industry. You have spent nearly 2 decades shaping pricing across different industries, but looking back to your early LinkedIn and Microsoft years, what initially drew you into pricing and what surprised you the most about the discipline as you went deeper?
I kind of starting from the beginning, my first degree was in database design. So my first steps in the corporate world were in big data, data analytics, and online advertising requires such kind of big data handling skills because you have the billions of records generated every hour, if not every minute. So I ended up in online advertising because of that skill set match. Uh, it was more general product analytics at first. And then I started focusing on the monetization, pricing, revenue management. It is because I enjoyed the fact that you can have this very quick, almost instant, measurable impact on the business. You can change the setup, the algorithm for the auction, the price points, and you can measure the results, a few days later.
Brilliant. Having run pricing and yield at LinkedIn and later pricing for SaaS companies like Zoom and DocuSign, what do you see as the fundamental differences between digital media monetization and SaaS monetization?
I see there are a lot of commonalities. It's actually we use similar analytical tools. In both cases, we need to give input into product team of how to adjust and build the product, kind of the new releases, iterations. There is the collaboration with the sales team. There is financial forecasting and A/B testing of the different scenarios to be implemented. So I think that there is a lot of commonalities. But the one fundamental difference that I've noticed is that in online media, there are situations when the machines buy from the machines. So we are exposing some ad inventory, we're sending it to the auction. There are different ad agents that are bidding for that inventory. So according to whatever algorithms they have, then impressions are redirected to the highest bidder. Whereas in SaaS, there is this huge element of unpredictable human factor. Is this the trust in your brand? Is the positioning against the competition? Is the whether we manage to do the proper value selling or not? So I didn't see that part of trying to quantify perceptions, likes and dislikes in the online media world. I think that it's kind of the main difference that I see between online media and SaaS.
Okay. I may want to come back to this, the idea of machines buying from machines. I've got some other things I want to touch on first, but I think this is incredibly interesting, particularly when we factor in AI. So
Right.
let's park that one.
Okay.
Your LinkedIn profile calls out the incremental revenue that you helped drive at LinkedIn through pricing and yield strategy. Can you give me some examples of specific tactics that you use to drive that revenue? I think one of the things that my audience enjoys the most, certainly one of the things I enjoy, is when we get down to, okay, you stay at this level of pricing strategy, but give me like the 2 or 3 things that you actually did on the ground to drive that revenue.
I think that those practical tactics can be grouped in certain themes. I think that the first thing that I focused on was the inventory. So understanding what is being unsold, why, and can we refashion our offering or rate card or pricing structure in order to fill that space. So driving volume up. That was kind of the immediate element. And then I moved into the rate cards, making them complex enough that we have a range of options for the different price points, different kind of corners of the market that we want to cover. We want to make sure that we have a solution for everybody. But then also we cannot make those rate cards too complex, so they are still manageable from kind of pricing operations perspective and not confusing to sales. So that's where we are getting to kind of the final step in my transformation there, which was setting up a deal desk. And I think that managing sales behavior was something that was kind of not tried before and something I introduced at LinkedIn. So setting up deal desk, making sure that we structure the deals the right way, that the discounting is more informed, brought kind of instant ECPM boost.
Let me ask you a question I hadn't intended to, but as you've been talking, I was reflecting on the fact that when you were at LinkedIn, I would have been at Yahoo, and I hadn't thought about the fact that we were essentially competing against each other. As someone at Yahoo who was looking at the LinkedIn business, we always thought that you had relatively high prices, a relatively strong audience, and because you had good data about all your users, you were able to keep both sell through and pricing high. First, as much as you feel comfortable agreeing with that assessment or disagreeing, but also if that is true, what were the tactics that you used to sort of maintain that premium price point? Because that's the holy grail for a lot of businesses, right?
We had actually the opposite problem to what you're asking about. So the premium price point was kind of maintained because of the perception of the brand and the perception of our inventory, and we were selling out of that premium inventory at very high prices. So that was not where I needed to focus. I actually had to focus in kind of the less premium parts of the inventory that were not considered kind of good for branding. That's what was a little bit more of a kind of performance inventory that LinkedIn wasn't known for. So nobody was coming to us to buy on CPC basis or to buy on auction basis. That was that area that some areas of the inventory had a lot of volume that was lower quality than the most premium, and that's what we needed to fill.
I'm going to keep pulling on this thread because I actually have had a couple of clients in the last couple of years who have had challenges where they have some high price points around some of their hand sold inventory, and they've had concerns, particularly around either some of the less attractive placements or programmatic placements, that if they run in those programmatic placements, that they're going to start to impact the high price points on their good products. So I guess that the question is, one, how do you create, either through channel management or pricing structures, the ability to have both those products in the market without cannibalizing each other? And we don't necessarily need to focus on LinkedIn, although it seems like a very good example, but just broadly, because I see so many clients with that type of problem.
So kind of in short, we were trying to separate those buyers through a different go-to-market. So we were selling the homepage, the main banner, the 300 times 250, then through agencies and through our enterprise sales reps. But some of the bundles where you were maybe you would get impressions, but you couldn't guarantee where they were coming from. So that's kind of those repackaging the remnant options were sold through different partners and more of an SMB sales. So it was we were trying to separate those customers. But also, to your point about the cannibalization, if we make one product in the portfolio significantly cheaper than the expensive one, there is some risk of that. Yes, so that was always a consideration, and that's where we were trying to maintain the differences in list prices to be kind of easy to justify. And then we had a structure of some kind of ad hoc discounting that we could apply later in the conversation and do it kind of very sparingly, and provide those deeper price cuts only for a very selected group of customers who would buy volume, but they couldn't afford the higher ECPMs.
I want to get to the contrast in with SaaS here in a minute, but I'm going to keep pulling on the string because you and I have a lot of distance from sort of some of the dynamics of those days. I'll share one thing that I've kind of changed my approach on over the last 10 or 15 years. When I've been working on the publisher side, very much my yield mindset was, how do I protect the publisher assets? How do I keep the prices up? How do I keep agencies and advertisers from gaming against me? And now in the last few years, my mindset has switched much more to how can I create for the advertiser or the agency a better experience where they get the products that they want at the price points they need, which still may lead you into different product strategy. But for me, the mindset has been very much from being a defensive publisher to being, okay, all these customers of mine, I need to create a good experience for them. And so again, whether it's LinkedIn or Microsoft or any of your other sort of digital media experiences, where were you in that mindset a few years ago? And how do you come out now when you think about the pricing dynamic of the seller versus the customer mindset?
When I was at LinkedIn, I was definitely thinking more on I had the publisher hat on. And it's a really interesting thing that you mentioned, because now I reflect on it, I think that was probably not the best way to approach the problem, but that's how I thought about it. I would construct products and offerings and packages the way that it made sense for us from inventory management perspective. And obviously it was justified through the performance and kind of exposure metrics. But it was rare that I would go, tag along with sales reps to understand how the customers want to buy it. It was partially because LinkedIn was such a kind of hot topic that we had a lot of demand. We were actually struggling with supply rather than demand. So even those maybe shortcomings in my approach there didn't hurt the business. But when I compare it to how I think about pricing now, is quite the opposite, where my job is to understand how the customers want to buy things. And I have to influence the product team who thinks from design perspective, from kind of the engineering perspective, that those three features go together and they should be in one package. I have to counter that with the customer-centric view, saying, yeah, but they don't want to pay for those three features together. They shouldn't be packaged in one offering, right? So I over the 10 plus years, I think that I switched much more to trying to understand how customer wants to buy rather than trying to understand how the engineering want to sell.
Okay, so you may have actually half answered the next question I wanted to ask you, which was, if you could go back to your LinkedIn years, knowing what you now know from all of your SaaS learnings, what would you do differently in terms of building, pricing, and bundling the yield systems for a digital media company? So what I think I just heard from you was the mindset around making things easier for the customer, potentially bundling in different ways. Are there other lessons that you've learned along the way that you would go back and do something different now?
One thing that I kind of smile about when I look back at my work at LinkedIn, that 15 years ago, was I was trying to perfect the display advertising offering that we had. And I didn't pay enough attention to what is coming next, which was content marketing. And I think I was a bit too hung up on the main product that we have now, rather than already thinking about the next step. And I think, we see it today too. Like I just finished the search engine optimization for my website for my consulting practice, and now I already need to think of AI optimization. So we constantly need to think of the next step, and it is uncomfortable for me to leave the previous step maybe in the state that is not perfect and not enough from my for my perception, but we should just leave it and move to the next technology, next offering that is taking over.
All right. Now, you have built from scratch a number of pricing organizations, both in digital media and SaaS. When you are thinking about building one of those organizations, what's the biggest organizational mistake that you see companies making when they're setting up a pricing function, and how would you avoid it?
The main mistake comes from the misconception that pricing is about the actual prices, which I always joke that that's probably the 15% of our work, and that's the easiest part of the job. Defining what we should be selling, so defining packages, understanding what features should be added where and why, also the whole quote to cash process design, managing sales behavior through deal desk. Like there are so many elements that are part of the pricing and SaaS monetization team kind of scope, that I think that's one thing, is that we need to understand that it's much more broader than just setting up price points.
I'm so glad you said that. You asked, I think, before we even started, if there was anything I'd ever clip out. I may clip out what you just said to repurpose it as its own video. This idea that the pricing is such a small part of the overall pricing and yield type function, the actual price setting of what the number is. That's so true. But so then let me ask the question of, when you're setting up one of these organizations, how do you ensure that it's well positioned within the broader company to be effective, that your peer organizations understand your role and that they don't feel like you are stepping on their toes? Again, I'll share from my own experience. It was often a war at Yahoo because I felt like yield should be involved in almost every part of the business, because we needed to be part of the supply conversation. We needed to be part of the demand. We needed to set up a deal desk. We needed to be part of sales incentives. We need to be part in conversations with marketing. And so I literally received feedback multiple times like, whoa, back off. This isn't a pricing thing. I'm like, okay, we're not price setting, but the implications for how effectively we're going to run the monetization function are informed by all of these conversations. So clearly, I took the broadest possible definition of pricing and yield management in that situation. How do you ensure, and I'll give you one more, it's a long question. I often see online pricing people complaining that they feel like they're being beaten down by other parts of the organization. Like sales gets all the credit, pricing never gets the credit. So the subtext is, how do you set up a pricing organization where it's effective and the people in your team feel like they have good career paths?
I do agree with you that pricing is very cross-functional. I would think that the most cross-functional team in an organization. So there is a risk that if you're positioned under head of finance, then you're going to be seen as the finance person. So the product team is not going to kind of naturally, automatically accept your product requirements to product design as their own, because you're from the kind of competing organization. So that's where and that is the main issue, to be honest. And I think that it needs to be solved on a kind of personal level by the head of pricing. That the good head of pricing needs to be able to manage that those biases and be able to work very well with all of those organizations, from finance, sales, marketing, product, even legal. And that's where, like, most recently I was asked by a CEO, where do I think that the pricing team should live? And my answer was, it doesn't really matter, because they have to behave like they were part of each of the teams that are under you. And I don't think there is a simple way to do it, but my kind of hack is listening and trying to spend enough time with the main stakeholders from different teams that they feel like I do listen to their concerns and I'm not pushing my ideas against them, but we are in this together, and I reassure them that we have common goal here. It's, you know, it's a little bit more difficult to do it over Zoom or over like video calls. I would prefer the kind of personal face-to-face touch, but that's my way of making sure that there is as little kind of pushbacks as possible.
So I'm really sharing a few different types of questions now, but I caught up with a friend recently, and they were telling me, I asked the open, I need more on this video podcast, and they said you need content that shows a CEO why pricing matters. And why this is on my mind is you just referenced the CEO that you were talking to. And it's so ingrained in everything I've done that it's so obvious that I don't even think you need to justify it. So the question back to you is, in terms of pushing the pricing function, its importance in an organization, one, have you ever run into challenges proving that pricing is indeed an important function unto itself? And if so, how have you proven that to the CEO and the C-suite?
I think there are three main areas where a company can have big kind of pricing related issues that would hinder the business. One would be the sales behavior, predominantly over discounting and the lack of consistency around discounting. The other one would be kind of the packaging. So we have new features, old packages, and it's like we don't know where to add those new features. So there's the confusion there. And the third one is complexity. With at some point we have 4,000 different SKUs and multiple different arrangements, and we kind of get stuck in the complexity of the business. So these would be usually the kind of one of those three would be the problem that I get a phone call when that's encountered. So it's depending on the problem. I think that with packaging, there are always A/B tests that you can show results of to demonstrate that kind of the new ways of packaging can be promising and increase revenue. For the deal desk and the managing behavior, then running kind of a analysis and then a pilot. Also, kind of the proof is in the pudding. You can show some preliminary results, and that the revenue impact speaks for you then.
I'm going to ask you the question, and I'm going to give you the context to give you a little bit of time to think. The question will be, what is the most challenging pricing situation you've been in, and how did you get out or seen? And in this one, I suggest we don't use company names. I'll share an example of a company I worked with that kept discounting more and more every quarter and kept trying to pull demand forward. This was a company that was absolutely in growth mode. They needed to show exceptional growth. And they got to the stage where they were doing every deal as an exception, and 26% of their revenue got signed off by hand in the last 3 days of a quarter. And we got called in to try to unwind that situation. And that is my example of the most challenging pricing situation I've been in. And I'm going to let myself off the hook by not explaining how we got out of it. But I'd like to hear if you have an equivalent of a tough sort of pricing gone sideways situation that you've had to deal with.
It's not just one example, but the first thing that springs to my mind is a certain theme. It is a situation when industry leader who went to market first with some kind of solution. So let's say, we can name examples like DocuSign being for electronic signature, Zoom being for video conferencing, like a Dropbox for online storage. Like those types of companies are the leaders. And then at some point, the kind of what we call them ankle biters, they replicate that functionality and they start selling it at much lower prices. And then the whole kind of deflation and willingness to pay sliding happens. So the leader is very hard to explain to the CEO and the head of finance that that thing that you have been selling for $10 is now worth $4. So we cannot continue selling the same functionality that we have been selling for the same price, because it's the willingness to pay is sliding 20-30% year to year. That message is very difficult to convey. So that way, what the head of product or the CEOs prefers to do is to overfill the packages that they're offering with extra features. These are often the features that are not demanded by the majority of the market, so nobody's buying those new packages because the majority of the market would require maybe kind of the basic set of features. It's only the premium 20 or 15 top 15% that require the newest functionalities. So the overall volume is going down, churn is increasing, and my hands are tied because we are not agreeing with the leadership team on what the main root cause of the problem is. So I cannot really apply any kind of remedies if we don't agree what the problem is.
I love the example, which actually leads me to my next question related to bundling, because bundling is obviously such a core part, especially of SaaS, but depending on the product in digital media as well. And bundling could be a decision that the product organization gets to make. And if you're in a relatively dysfunctional setup, product says, here's the bundle, pricing, go price it for me. Obviously, in a better setup, you would have more collaboration in terms of what the bundle will be that would be informed by the pricing team. On the question of bundling, what have you seen work organizationally in terms of the sequencing of how the bundling decision should work, and particularly the relationship? I say product because I've worked at a lot of tech companies. I can imagine in other organizations, it might be product marketing or some other organization. Who should make those bundling decisions, and how have you seen it work well?
I haven't seen it work well often, to be honest. I think that for SaaS, bundling is very often a bad idea. I think it looks good on the surface. It promises cross-sell, but when you really look into the results afterwards, I haven't seen incremental revenue very often. And it also creates a lot of additional complexity for pricing operations. So I think it's a fundamentally different conversation in SaaS compared with the ad industry. Because like if you have a customer who is buying display advertising, they will probably see some value in search or in email. Whereas if somebody is buying a website builder or a video communications tool, they might not be interested in accounting software that we're really trying to push onto them. That bundling in the SaaS world is often designed from the kind of CFO perspective, not from the customer perspective. So, a moment ago we were talking about the, designing offering from the kind of engineering of product view versus what the customer really wants to buy. I think bundling is the example of the former. Like we know that there is a certain gap that we need to fill in our budget, and we are trying to fill it with bundling. It often doesn't happen.
I couldn't agree with you more, because, and usually you see it exactly the way you just described it, is we've got some inventory we can't sell. Let's bundle the bad stuff with the good stuff and hope that somebody will buy it. Usually there's very little strategy. And I will say, I think that occurs less in digital media now than it used to. One of the good things that's come out of the move to so much more programmatic buying and buying at the impression level is that there is a spotlight on this inventory is more valuable for the following reasons. And so you can't hide as much the bad inventory, although you certainly still see people trying. Wow, and we are touching on topics I did not think that we would get to. You have, let's just close on the future of sort of pricing leadership. You have taught courses, you've sort of mentored many pricing leaders. In Pricing Week, they talked about all the different people that you had mentored or that you had taught. So for someone who's stepping into their first head of pricing role now, what is the most important lessons that you would like to pass on to that next generation of pricing leaders?
Something that took me nearly 20 years to arrive to is, might sound controversial, but don't be 100% data driven. Because pricing is about the forecasts and calculations and quantifying perception, but it's also about the trust and the ease of use and the convenience of the product, and those kind of less quantifiable elements. And the data that I have at my disposal can only describe and predict the future for the next 2, maybe 3 quarters. And the vision can go further. Like somebody can have a vision that spans to the next 2, 3, 5 years. And developing that vision yourself, or listening to somebody who developed it, your head of product, your CMO, your CEO, is much more important than I realized that 2 decades ago. So it's a balance between art and science, and I have been proven wrong when I relied purely on data, but also I have proven others wrong when they were 100% vision focused and they ignored the metrics, and I was able to correct their thinking. So that balance between data and vision is one of the most important lessons that I learned over the years.
Brilliant. Jan, as we come to the close here, what's the best way for people to find you? You mentioned that you've just been working on your website for website optimization. What is that website and what is your LinkedIn?
Oh yeah, please take a look at my website, which is solio.team. If you'd like to sign up for the newsletter, we send out the tips and pricing thoughts every month. And yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to pick up any pricing chat and conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I am James Deaker. I am the Yield Doctor. Thank you for watching.